Hello, everyone. Social Work 527, classmates and Professor Jerry Farnett here with my good friend and colleague in the Professor of Human Services here at Onondaga Community College, Dr. Anita Wright, and she is graciously volunteered to let me interview her for the Interview a Professional. So, hi.
Hi.
Thank you for agreeing to do this.
Absolutely.
And I'm really excited to be speaking with you because I know all the great work you've done, but I'm really excited for my classmates and my professor to hear your interests and some of the things that you've been working on
Okay.
in the past and current.
Mhm.
So could we start with a little bit of personal background? How long you've been a social worker, areas of interest, areas that you have expertise in?
Okay, so I have really, as far as I'm concerned, been doing social work a long time. But I got my social work degree in 1984 from Syracuse University School of Social Work. I, at that time, was really working mostly with an adolescent population in sort of a youth center setting, which I adored because I love adolescents because they're angry most of the time. And I like people that are angry because that means there's momentum to change, as far as I'm concerned. But I led up to there only because I never thought I was going to be a social worker, but I started talking with people. I worked at Hutchings for a while as a therapy aide in the forensic unit. And I started talking to the director of education and training there, and he said, you know, you would be a great social worker. And I said, well, why? He says, because you really like people and you have a way with them. And I said, oh, that's really nice. Now, I came here originally to go to nursing school.
I know.
And that didn't go out well because that really wasn't for me. Okay, we'll leave it there. But as I went on, when I got my degree and then became licensed, I entered into a business association or partnership with someone to really deal with adult children of alcoholics. Because that was a big thing going on in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Everybody was a child of alcohol, you know. And in some sense, that's somewhat true, okay? The reason we wanted to meet with adult children is because we thought a lot of the press at that time was really pretty negative. It was like, you're gonna do this and it was always kind of a bad rap, you know? And we wanted to talk to people about the strengths you get from being a part of an addictive family. You know?
Strengths-based.
So I really liked that. So I did that for a while, but then I decided that who I really wanted to work with for a while, which I hadn't really directly, is addicts. I really like working with addicts because, again, they're at a crossroads. They don't have to change, really. But that change that they decide to make is unbelievable. The actual process that addicts have to go through in order to get to the end result, which is recovery, okay? They have to look at things that we never look at, you know? And I liked working with them because it made me look at those things too, you know, because it's not all about the actual chemical you use. It's about how you've lived your life and how you've interacted with people and how you take people. And so I liked all of that because it was like, wow, these people are working hard. I mean, they have to ask themselves every day, I'm not gonna drink today, but what am I gonna do positive for myself? How am I looking at myself? They have to be evaluating themselves, which I believe a good social worker does anyway. But when you're in a line of service it's always there that you have to be self-reflective, it really makes it a lot easier and sometimes a lot harder because you're kind of going, wow, so then am I sick? Or are they sick? Or is anybody really sick? I don't think anybody's really sick. I believe that people are doing the best they can, given what they know about where they are, given what they know about who they are. And as they learn more about themselves and their world, they can choose to act differently or not, you know.
Well said. There's a lot of information there. I'm also hearing in your response that you see people dealing with systems.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, to me, that's what being an MSW or a social worker is all about. If you're a real social worker, that's what I call it,
Okay.
is you're always looking at systems in everything. You're always taking what that person has as an issue that you're trying to provide a service for, and then lifting it up to take in the whole, to figure out, well, okay, so where does that come from? Somebody comes into you poor, they're homeless, let's say, and let's say they even have an addiction problem as well, or they think they do. Well, first of all, what do you have to take care of? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You gotta take care of the need first. If the person is homeless, you gotta find them a home. You can't concentrate on addiction if you don't have a place to sleep, or if you don't have anything to eat, or if you don't have any clothes, or or if you're in a violent situation, all of those things. That's when then you can attend to something that really needs all of your energy and attention. But then you have to think about, well, how did that person get there? What are the places I can pull from and go, well, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? As a system, are we providing what a person needs in order to get there? For instance, like right now, I was just in a meeting earlier this week talking about addiction and mental health. There are people that want to serve mentally ill folks and addicted folks, but there's not enough services to go around. Because what's happened is some services have decided to be the end-all be-all for everybody. I believe all of us have talent, and that talent is usually zeroed in on a couple of things usually, I don't believe I can serve everybody, and I don't believe that I have the answer or the service for everybody, even the addicts that come to see me. If they're in a domestic violence situation, I'm gonna send them to the experts in domestic violence. I may be able to start them in the conversation, but they should be with somebody that's actually studied that. Trauma, the same thing. And we all have trauma in different levels, but if it's somebody that's been to a war and has come back and cannot adjust to being here, I'm gonna send them to somebody that knows that really well, so that they get the best service they can get. And not that my service would be bad, but it wouldn't be on point as much as somebody that's actually studied that and studied the system in which that is in, But systems are very important for social workers, because the person is it's just like when I was in school, person in social context was my thing. Person in environment, where is the environment? Not just the person and looking at them as sort of a disease entity, but that they came from some system, okay? So what's in that system? What's in the neighborhood? Who's in the neighborhood? How's the neighborhood run? What impacts on the neighborhood? All of those things address and impact on that person.
In a way, you're describing a social worker as a detective.
Almost, yes.
Getting to know the person.
Exactly, and an advocate.
Yes.
Because sometimes us social workers have to just go out there and advocate for services, or advocate for laws to be changed, or advocate for places to be built that other people can use for service.
Wow. You've been speaking a lot about your experience with people in recovery. I know that you've facilitated a variety of groups. Could you share with the group here
Sure.
some of the different groups you facilitated, types
Right.
of groups?
Yeah, now, the first groups I started to facilitate were actually educational groups for adolescents. And then I did what we used to call, in those days, a rap session. I facilitated that conversation. Usually that was a time when the adolescents coming to the youth center could talk about anything. Anything that was bothering them, anything of concern. So it went from child trauma to, can we have a basketball team, okay? But the fact is to get adolescents all talking about one subject is not an easy thing. So I really learned well how to facilitate a group of adolescents. I've also facilitated groups of professionals, in terms of professionals that are actually trying to learn something, and I started supervising professionals that didn't have supervision in their clinic or in their service for, just to check how you're doing, how you're dealing with the people you're dealing with, which is a whole different kind of group. I've obviously facilitated groups for addicts, because that is the primary mode of treatment for addiction, is group. And then I also, in my doctoral days, I facilitated groups for African American women that we were trying to talk into using condoms because of AIDS. And that gets a little tricky, what do you say to an African American woman who says, if I tell my man to put a condom on, he's gonna ask me where I've been, and then I might get hurt because of that.
Right.
So, but to me, groups, any group, moves along a progression. Just like Yalom said, it just moves along a progression. You just if you just keep going and trust the process of the group, it will always work exactly the way Jan has said, which I find fascinating, because he wrote the book a long time ago. But groups really, in terms of process, have not changed that much. But what you need in order for a group, to me at least, because there were times where I didn't feel I had to facilitate a group very well. It could have been intimidation, feeling intimidated. I don't know the subject matter enough, so what am I going to say? It also at first was about control. I tend to sometimes be a control freak. And so what you want to do is everybody to feel good and talk and be happy, and so you want to control the conversation. You really can't do that in a group. You have to really, and I believe my group skills have gotten even better now that I'm a little older and know myself, because I don't have the need to control the group. I don't have the need to steer the conversation. I can really just sit there and facilitate it, and make sure that everybody feels like they're welcome. And it really has to do with how much you know you and how much you're okay with you, that you don't have to prove anything to anybody. That makes sense.
It does make sense. It's also fascinating. I know that you recently got back from a presentation, but it was also group work on multicultural.
And cultural competence,
Yes.
yes. Cultural competence in end-of-life care, cultural competence with geriatric patients, and cultural competency in terms of health literacy. So, when you think about that, it's all kind of the same, but it's a little different, particularly if you're dealing with professionals. Professionals always want to believe they're competent. So you're trying to tell them that there's some things you just need to look at in order to be more confident, but I'm not telling you that you're incompetent, right? Because that's something that none of us want to feel is incompetent. We want to feel competent. So what I try to do in that kind of facilitation process is pull on people's strengths in terms of, hey, you sit every day with people that are dying and help them pass through this life onto the next in a way that is gentle, dignified, respectful. That's a very difficult thing. I could not do that, okay? I just don't think I have the wherewithal to do it, at least now, but you do that every day. So we're all gonna make mistakes when we deal with people, because we can't know every culture, every nuance of somebody, every single thing that's gonna hurt one of the people that we work with. We're never gonna know all of that. But the thing we can start with is respect.
True.
And if we can respect that person, which means it reflects back to us, can we respect us individually, then it's easier to respect other people. So that's the way I came at it for those folks that more professional folks.
What a nice way to approach it.
Thank you.
We, for a couple of semesters now, and including the course that I'm currently in, have been looking at different therapeutic approaches, cognitive behavioral, rational emotive. Do you have a favorite approach? Are you eclectic? How do you approach a group?
I'm pretty eclectic, but I think most of me is really is person and environment centered, but also Rogerian. I love him. Okay, the reason I do is because he really wants you to work to see the person. That you see the person as a human being that needs service but is not defective. And I think sometimes a lot of our therapies and medical ways that we do things always sees the person as defective. And they're not. They're not defective.
Get to see the person instead of seeing a human being come in with a problem. It's
That's
a person.
right. Exactly. And not just okay, you're addict, so then we're going to deal with you that way. Or you've got diabetes, so we'll deal with you that way.
As we've talked about, the old medical model of what's wrong with you.
Absolutely.
Social work has transitioned to what's happened to you.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Ah.
That's exactly it. Right.
I hear that approach in the way you've described things that you've done, in the way, and I certainly see it in the way you work with students here and in the groups that I've been fortunate enough to have participated in with you. So,
That's right.
Yeah, Carl Rogers is.
He's the guy.
Yeah, he is.
And some people would probably call that a humanistic approach. What I try to do is I have a lot of information in my mind and a lot of ways I've done things, but I've always relied also on my own intuition. So I choose things that are going to work, that I believe are going to work, and I try them out. and then see, okay, does that seem okay? There are some of my clients I've had in the past where I would take a more cognitive approach
Mhm.
because they need me to tell them, boom, 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 this will be the end.
Mhm.
Boom, 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 this will be the end of the second part. Boom, boom, because they need that organization, if you will,
Mhm.
okay? That they know they've reached a goal,
Mhm.
you know? So if you say, okay, what I want you to do is make sure you go to 2 meetings this week,
Mhm.
you know? Okay, I can do 2 meetings, let me do that, okay? If you say, I want you to write a letter to your mother or your father, then you can do that, and you can check it off, they can see it's happened,
Right.
you know? So sometimes people need that.
It's a sense of satisfaction there, too.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
We are winding down
Okay.
here because I want to be considerate of your time, but I was just wondering if you might have some advice, words of wisdom to me and my fellow social work grad students here.
Yes. Well, first of all, I love being a social worker. There is nothing I would rather be as a social worker. And that's because it gives me a breadth of information and knowledge that can really help a great variety of people. The other thing is that I believe social workers are advocates, they're change agents. They're the ones that help the system change. And I don't want social workers to forget that. There was a time there in the 90s that social workers started becoming therapists. And not that there's anything wrong with therapists, but that's not our main purpose. Our main purpose is social justice and social change. Yes, we may do that from a variety of ways, individually, in a group, community, all of those. But that's really what our purpose is as social workers. And I believe strongly in that. I believe that in order for someone to be a very good social worker, or the best they can, is they have to know themselves. That you have to constantly be looking at who are you, how are you coming across, what are the languages you're using, how do you still see people, what do you believe to be true about human beings. Those things are really important for me as a social worker to continue to churn around my head. Because, sometimes we get into a snit, get a thing. Somebody messes, we get a thing about it. Well, we have to realize that they're people too. Even if it's somebody that's, our immediate supervisor, or it's a colleague that we respected and then they did something we didn't like, we have to remember they're people too, and that everybody does the best they can. And that's what I always say to myself. Even if I'm dealing with somebody that I really am having a hard time with, I just say they're doing the best they can. At this time, what they know and what they know about me and what they know about the situation. But the more you know about you, that's who the person is coming to engage with when they come into your office or they come into your service. They don't care about your degrees, they don't care about the books you've read, they don't care about the people that you know. They want to engage with you because most of the people we see are wounded. Most of the people we see, this is the first conversation that they're having with a person, another person, about their deepest, darkest sadness, their deepest, darkest pain. And that is what we have to remember. It may take them a while to get to the actual root of that pain, but that's what they've come to talk to because there's nobody there. Remember, most of us don't really talk to each other anymore. We don't really talk, Yes, there's still some of us, but a lot of us have gotten caught up in the little short things that we get on little phones and that kind of thing, and we've forgotten that we need to be looking at each other in the eye and talking to people. I mean, they have to feel your energy. You have to feel theirs, and help them transmute or transform that energy so they have a better life.
Wow. What a great way to end.
Bye.
Pearls of wisdom here. Thank you, class. Thank you.